welcome to Podgorica, the capital of Montenegro, for Europe District, our magazine on EU enlargement. The land of the Black Mountains, as it's known across the Balkans, gained independence in 2006. As we'll see, Montenegro is hoping to follow in Croatia's footsteps and join the European Union in the coming years. In its June report, the European Commission recommended the start of negotiations, but warned Montenegro must do more to fight corruption and organized crime. We'll also tell you why this small Balkan nation has been asked to drastically improve its road safety record. And we'll meet our guest Milena Jovicevic, a Montenegrin artist. She will show us her Montenegro off the beaten tracks. But let's move to our first story. Early parliamentary elections will take place across the country on the 14th of October. The ruling Democratic Party of Socialists has been in charge in Montenegro since 1991. But allegations of corruption and a troubled economy could give a boost to a previously disunited opposition. What are the reasons behind these early elections? Our reporter Julie Dungelov finds out for us.
Despite holding 48 of the Chamber's 81 seats, Montenegro's ruling coalition voted in June to hold parliamentary elections 6 months ahead of schedule. In the eyes of the opposition, the government knows the public mood is bad and likely to worsen as the country's economic outlook darkens.
It's quite logical for the ruling party to hold elections after the summer season, at a time when everyone has the false impression that things are going better. It has nothing to do with Europe.
So how does the government explain the move?
We have decided to put the elections in October because we thought that a new government should start the negotiations with the European Union, that we should give the chance a full mandate for a new government to start negotiations.
Over the decades that followed the breakup of Yugoslavia in 1991, Montenegro was ruled by Milo Đukanović, the head of the Democratic Party of Socialists. Under Đukanović, the government chose to secede from Serbia in 2006. Powerful and controversial, Đukanović stepped down as Prime Minister 2 years ago following European Union pressure, only to return as party head. Yet in recent months, Montenegrin politics have been awash with change. Televised debates are organised and new names have appeared.
We represent new political faces with new ideas, the new energy that Montenegro needs. Because for 23 years, the central question in our politics has been whether we're pro-Serb or pro-Montenegrin. We are the alternative to this.
The government accuses its parliamentary opponents of defending the interests of Belgrade and failing to come to terms with Montenegro's secession from Serbia. The opposition says the ruling coalition is rife with corruption.
Corruption is one of the biggest problems of Montenegro. You even speak of the denigration of society due to corruption and mafia scandals. These cases never come to trial. We want to guarantee rule of law and eliminate the corruption, things which the European Union is also demanding. We're not asking for anything more than conformity to the standard European demands.
Corruption's tainted all levels of Montenegrin civil society. Recently, the issue sparked waves of protest. In a rare spectacle, Montenegrins took to the streets to denounce something other than ethnic or religious problems. Anti-corruption campaigners say the protesters' anger is justified.
Montenegro is known also by serious issues with organized crime, and we are talking about huge amounts of money. So those huge amounts of money are sometimes being fueled into the elections because, you know, the criminals want to make sure that those that are cooperating with them are basically staying in power. And in that sense, it's really hard to expect that some other parties which are not having that kind of connections will have a chance. Also, the governing parties, you know, after 23 years, they are controlling pretty much everything.
The problems also pushed the European Union to take a tougher stance in negotiations over Montenegro's membership. The opening rounds of talks will focus on the rule of law and the fight against corruption.
EU has gathered a few experiences from previous enlargement, and one of the negative experiences was that the enforcement, the implementation of the legislation and the rules and the enforcement was not sufficient.
Little by little, the Montenegrin population are beginning to voice their feelings.
The people are very happy. The government's great. I see people spend. Everything's great.
Tell me who has a good life here in Montenegro. Give me one example. You can't say that all is well. How can you say that? You're young. You find it comfortable that we have to work this way?
In spite of the country's problems, many expect the ruling coalition to come out on top in the coming elections.
And for more on the story, I'm glad to be joined by the man who's been in charge of Montenegro for the past 2 years, the Prime Minister of the country, Igor Lukšić. Mr. Lukšić, thank you for having us here in the centre of Podgorica. You called early parliamentary elections 6 months before the end of the parliament's term. Why such a decision? After all, you had a strong majority in parliament.
And I'm pretty sure that we're going to continue having strong majority after the elections. The logic has been that we are now in the process of preparing for the more substantial talks to come. So we thought that the best timing to hold elections is actually right now, so that government, which will probably be re-established in full mandate next November or December, will have clear 4 years to continue with the European process, to try to close as many chapters as possible. So I think that's quite a reasonable logic that we've had.
Your party, the DPS, has been in charge in Montenegro for the past 2 decades. Isn't it time for the country to have a sort of breath of fresh air and try something new?
The DPS in early 90s is not DPS in 2012. It's a totally different party. We are not governing on our own. We have coalition partners. People have realized that choosing this sort of the coalition, that choosing DPS is probably the best choice.
Is it to say that the opposition is not credible?
It is, of course, up to the people to tell on anybody's credibility. But I think when you look at the competition, I think some of those parties are still trying to find their true character, their identity. And I think that's one of the reasons why people still don't understand them. I think some of the parties should really make clear their position towards Montenegrin statehood, Montenegrin independence, some of the emotional things that characterize any country. Plus, they need to come out with more credible programs.
A few more questions on the perception of Montenegro from Brussels. The European Union had originally welcomed your appointment as a strong signal that Montenegro was ready to draw a line under the Đukanović years. And there is a sense of surprise in Brussels when they realize that Mr. Đukanović is still the leader of your party. Hasn't he and his legacy become a liability for your European bid?
Well, I don't think so. I haven't ever heard actually any official point made like that, or even unofficial, even off the record. What Mr. Đukanović did 2 years ago and why he decided to step down also tells in his favor that he is really a credible politician with a vision. And we are in the process of certain transition, but that transition at some point will obviously end as any transition.
So he's no longer pulling the strings?
I think everybody does what his job description says.
The European Commission has highlighted the urgent need to tackle crime and corruption. Why is it so difficult to clean up the country once and for all?
Well, I mean, I don't think that there is any country in the world that has weeded out corruption or organized crime whatsoever. I think the point of the European integration process is to build institutions that are able to deal with any sort of a challenge. And that is probably one of the reasons why European Commission came out with a new approach. And the concept is based on early opening of those 23 and 24 chapters and closing them at a very late stage, because you need to prove from very early in the process towards the end of the process your credibility. And then member states will be relaxed when they make a decision to ask new countries to come in, because we will have had a credible track record and will have been able to prove that our institutions perform adequately in dealing with those troubles. It's up to us to develop institutions that are able to deal with that, so that at the end of the process we can say, okay, everybody should be comfortable because we have done what has been asked from us to do.
Igor Lukšić, Prime Minister of Montenegro, thank you very much.
Thank you.
With its tortuous mountain roads, Montenegro can be a very challenging place for drivers. The government has vowed to reduce the number of road deaths to meet EU criteria. The hope is that one day, this will become common practice across the country.
My daughter's in front without a belt. It's not allowed, but I'll pay the fine. She likes being in front.
You're not wearing your seatbelt?
I know I don't have my belt, it's my fault. We need to change people's attitudes.
In town, you don't have to put your belt on, do you?
Actually, you do. When it comes to road safety, many Montenegrins don't seem very well informed. The European Commission says that 90% of the country's accidents could be avoided through simple measures. It's enough to drive road safety activists round the bend.
Here we're at the exit of a school in Podgorica. You'll see what it's like for children to cross the road. They have to squeeze between the cars. You see, there are taxi drivers stopped on the zebra crossing.
And when it comes to the highway code, even the driving instructors are ready to admit that having a license is no guarantee of safe driving.
The training that students receive for their license isn't enough to know how to drive. They should really carry on the training afterwards, either taking additional lessons with an instructor or with a more experienced driver.
Yet Montenegro seems to be on the road to change. Speeding and poor infrastructure are the main causes of death, prompting a spate of awareness campaigns. While flowers and memorials still line the country's laybys, there are now also road signs like this one, which reads "Slow down" to see me sooner this evening. The government has also stepped up checks in cities and on main roads. They say the number of road deaths was halved between 2006 and 2011, coming closer to the European average. These police officers have the task of chasing down offenders.
We just flashed someone. We'll see if he keeps on speeding or not.
After a chase of a few kilometers, the officers pull the driver over.
You are being stopped for speeding. 111 kilometers an hour instead of 60. This is a big speeding offense. The law demands a 2-month withdrawal of your license, the loss of 3 points, and a fine of 50 to 150 euros.
Still, this driver's allowed to leave with nothing more than a slap on the wrist and a reminder of the law. Proof Montenegro, like many of its Balkan neighbors, still has some way to go on the road to safe driving.
Well, after a very safe journey, I'm here in Petrovac, one of the many picturesque towns on the Adriatic coast. Meanwhile, our reporter travelled further north to Kotor to see the first edition of the Mediterranean Film Festival. As you will see, it's brought together actors and directors from all over the region.
As rain falls, the citadel of Kotor hosts the first edition of the Montenegro Film Festival of the Mediterranean. In the face of big-budget American blockbusters and after the breakup of Yugoslavia, the region's film industry is seeking a new identity.
We lose our culture, the Yugoslav culture, which was developed and based on a multicultural influences of the Balkan region.
Many here are nostalgic for Balkan cinema's heyday. Former Yugoslav leader Tito fostered a thriving film industry during his decades in power. These days, movie makers have a tough time finding funding. Festivals like this one allow budding directors to build new networks as they seek to break the silence that followed the region's wars.
Societies in the Balkans, in former Yugoslavia, they need this medium to be able to revisit the historical wasteland of the last 20 years.
Before the wars, Balkan cinema won plaudits at film festivals around the world. Branko Balatic director of 1983 comedy classic Balkan Express, was among the cream of the crop. Despite the violence of the following years and the rise of nationalisms, today film still manages to cross the post-war borders.
I work with people from other Balkan countries. It's strange. They're people with whom I was already working at the time of the former Yugoslavia. They've returned to their homeland in Croatia, Slovenia and Serbia. I came back to Montenegro, and today we're working together again, as if nothing's happened.
Celebrating its first edition in style, the Montenegro Film Festival makes no bones of its ambition to restore Balkan cinema to its former glory. The old guard want to revive the industry's role in political criticism. Many young people, at least in Montenegro, have other ideas.
Montenegrin cinema is characterized by its apolitical nature, which is strange. It's not characteristic of other Balkan or ex-Yugoslav cinema. It's apolitical, inward-looking, with existential or individual problems.
Many young directors are forced to look abroad for funds to produce their movies. Some filmmakers like Jan Cvitkovic say foreigners often have only a superficial view of the region, seeing the inter-ethnic wars as the only money-making theme.
I've seen so many films, especially from this area, ex-Yugoslavia, when people, are making films just because, because there's opportunity to make a film. So let's make a film together. Yeah, I know you're from Austria, you're from Germany. We'll do a nice film about our war, We'll do a nice film about our war. It makes me puke.
Cvitkovic picked up the award for Best First Film at the Venice Festival in 2001. This year, his new movie, Archeo, a surrealist reflection on the theme of family, opened proceedings in Montenegro. The director says he wants to convince his colleagues to focus on film and consign their divisions to the past.
And we're back in the Bay of Petrovac, already famous at the time of the Romans. It's the end of the first part of Europe District, but we'll return after the news break and we'll continue our journey across Montenegro.